Are you working on a project that you want to collaborate on, or have you built something that you want to open source? Maybe you've just built something on your own and want an easy and secure way to back up your code. Let's talk about doing that with Git and GitHub. So first off, what is Git? Well, Git is a version control system, or source code management tool, depending on how you want to look at it. In both cases, what that lets you do is take a project, be it source code, documentation, really any type of file, and track the history of it and allow collaboration on top of it. So Git is a version control system that was created by Linus Torvalds, same guy behind Linux, and it originally came out in 2005. At a high level, it gives you the same capability as a lot of other versioning systems for code does. Specifically, you have a full history of all the changes in the repository or the code project that you're working on, including the ability to jump back to those or pull them into the mainstream of code. And most importantly, it allows multiple people to work on that code at any given time. So instead of having to do atomic checkouts of files like some older systems had, where specifically person A would lock file A and person B would not be able to work on that file at all until person A checked it back in, this allows everyone to work off of that collaboratively and eventually merge all their changes together. There have been a lot of tools in this space that you may have heard of, and some of the more notable ones, I guess, over the past 15-20 years have been Perforce, Visual Source Safe, CVS, BitKeeper, and many others. That's definitely not an exhaustive list. Some of these are definitely still around, but for the most part, Git backs the big players in this space right now. So that's offerings like Atlassian's Bitbucket, GitHub, GitLab, and a few of the other smaller open source projects around that. Today, we're going to walk through setting up a repository in GitHub and contributing some code to it, doing some changes to it, and then pulling those changes locally so that we can continue work. In a follow-up video, we're going to take a look at the broader development process around this, so things like branches, forks, and pull requests. And while the tutorials that we're going to look at will be focused on GitHub, the concepts apply to any Git-backed service. So you can take these and work with Bitbucket or GitLab, for example. The concepts will be the same, but the terminology may be slightly different. So to start off with, I'm going to assume that you already have an account on github.com. If you're looking to use a different service like GitLab, for example, by all means, feel free to use that. I'm not going to cover the sign up or account creation for any of these individual services as part of this video. We're just going to dive straight into what we're trying to accomplish. So first up, let's create a new repository. And we're just going to store some text files in here for today's example. Nothing too crazy. So I'm on my page for github.com. And I'm going to go through and under repositories, I'm going to click on new. And we're just going to call this demo repository. Effectively, this name just needs to be unique to your account. You can have the same name as something else, for example. Okay, so we have our repository name configured here. We're going to add a quick description. So we're going to call this demonstration repository. We're going to make this a public repo. For example, you'd be able to go in afterwards, after you've worked on this video, and clone this and do your own work off of it, for example, though you won't be able to do pushes back to it, and we'll cover that in the next video. The last thing we're going to do here for simplicity today is we're going to create a default README for this repository. And we're not going to bother with a license, we're not going to bother with a git ignore file. We'll talk about these at a later time. But at a very high level, git ignore allows you to ignore specific file extensions like those pesky DS store files on Mac OS. And adding a license gives you effectively a pick your own license for any project you build. So if you wanted to put some code up as part of an interview, for example, and you wanted to make sure that that employer couldn't just take it and use it in production, you could do something like put it under the GPL license, and this gives you a one-click integration for that. So we have our repository named, we've added a description for it, we've added a README, let's go ahead and create it. So we're going to click on Create Repository. And just like that, we now have our demo repo set up. Now that we have our repo set up, we're going to clone that, so make a copy of it, locally on my machine so that we can start working with it. The first thing we'll do here is click on this code button, And we're going to do a clone over SSH, just the default for my account. I've already added my key in my profile. There are instructions to do that in the GitHub documentation. So again, we're not going to take a look at it here. And we're going to copy this URL, or effectively this command we're going to use. With that, we're going to come over to my command line, which I'm going to bring up here, and we're going to clone that. So I've just got a blank directory here, nothing in it. And we're going to do git clone, and then we're going to paste in that URL that we copied from the UI. You can see cloning into demo repository. So take a look. There's my repository. Let's actually change into it. And we've got our README file. You'll notice we also have this .git directory. And what that is effectively the definition of the repository. So while we built this on GitHub, at the end of the day, you could take this repository and contribute it back to any of these services, any Git-backed service. Next thing we're going to do here is edit the README. So we're going to introduce some changes, and then we're going to stage those changes, commit them to the repository, so make them a change officially, and push that back up to github.com, where we're going to be able to see those changes. So coming in here, we can see we have our README file. So let's edit that. So by README, and it just says demonstration repository. So let's put something new in here. Look, I'm making changes. How exciting. And then we're going to save and quit those. So what I can do at this point, if I'm ever working on a larger repository, for example, I want to know everything that I've changed before I push anything through. So I can just run git status. And that's going to show me that for the most part, my branch is up to date, and I've only modified one file here, which is my readme.md. The next thing we're going to do is take those changes and stage them, meaning when I make a commit, I want those changes to be included. Right now, we just want to add everything we've changed, which is a decent sort of blanket approach to it. So we're going to run git add-a for adding everything. So now if we run git status again, we can see that we do have a change that's going to be committed, and it is that README file. Next up, we're going to add a commit message to this. And where commit messages matter is they're sort of a human description of what change you're making. So we're going to do git commit, which is going to create the commit. We're going to do -m for the message, and we're going to say adding changes to the README file as part of the demonstration. Hit enter, there we go. And now the next step is to push the change up. And I'll be frank, I can never remember this command in full, so I'm going to run git push. And what this will do, if the repository is already configured, is it will push the changes up. And if it's not already configured, it will give me an error and tell me which command to run to set the upstream repository. And because we cloned this from GitHub, it looks like it already has it in there, so everything is updated. At this point, we're going to change back to the web UI, and I want to see if my changes are actually there. So I'm just going to refresh this page, and sure enough, look, I'm making changes. How exciting. My changes are up there. The other thing we can do through GitHub is make changes directly in the UI, so very small ones, for example. So in this case, I'm going to add a new line that just says, look, it's another change. I really can't spell. Look, it's another change. We're going to say we're updating the README for the demo. And we're not going to add a detailed description in this case, just to keep things easy. We're going to commit directly onto the master branch, which you may see these days referred to as main in some cases. This case, the default it created is master for me. I'm going to commit those changes now. So when we take a look at this file through the UI, we can see, look, it's another change. Coming back to the command line now, though, I'm just going to clear my screen so we have some more continuity. If I take a look in here and I do a cat on the README, you'll notice I don't have that last change we made. What I need to do here is a pull, or synchronizing my local repository with the upstream. So I'm going to run git pull, and it's going to say, okay, there are changes to this file, 2 insertions, let's pull them down and give you that version locally. So if I run that same thing again to cat that README to see what's in it, you can see that we have the newest change now.